Well, here we are again, and given that last year's Aardmay was such a big hit, seems only fitting that we return to the Bristolian animation studio once again this year. But since I've reviewed all their movies already, it's time to take a look at something else of theirs. So this year, we're doing their TV shows. Now, I should stress that while I'm going to be looking at their most well-known shows, I'm not looking at all the shows they've been involved in, since Aardman have had their hands on a surprising amount of different TV shows, both ones they've made themselves and ones that they've assisted with. So for this year's Aardmay, we're going to be looking at their 6 most well-known TV series, the ones that most people are aware of, and the ones that have Aardman's trademark style to them. So we've not got any time to waste. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Aardmay 2019. Of course, that means we have to look at Aardman's first TV show ever, Morph. Yes, I know that most of you who watched last year's Aardmay were hoping to see Creature Comforts first, and don't worry, it is on its way, but we have to do this properly, so we're looking at Morph first. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with him, Morph is a being made out of plasticine, who lies on a desktop with his other friends, who are also made of plasticine, all of whom are able to morph themselves into anything they want, and have various small key adventures using the various items that have been left on their office space home. Basically, for you Atlanteans who are not familiar with Morph, he's essentially the Gumby of the UK, and while I would usually go on about how the Americans are stealing our ideas again, much to my surprise, Gumby actually came out first. But that's a story for another time. Now, the interesting thing about Morph is that even though he is technically the star of his own show, his show is almost always shown as part of another TV series. Usually art programs like Take Heart, where he got his premiere in 1977, though I became familiar with Morph from the CBBC art show classic, Smart, hosted by Kristen O'Brien, Zoe Ball, and the late Mark Spate, among others. And it became one of the biggest selling points of the show, so much so that the host would even interact with Morph on the show itself, and Morph was even a part of the logo and is probably the reason why Smart was more popular than Art Attack. Well, that and of course, it didn't have the head in it. Anyway, as for the show of Morph itself, none of the characters in Morph can speak English. Instead, they speak a gibberish language, which sounds like Donald Duck has had a stroke. But it is very charming in its own way, much like the Clanger's voice, and since episodes of Morph are between 1 and 5 minutes, they don't last long enough to get annoying. They did have some narration in the early episodes, but they eventually decided to go the full Tom and Jerry and just have the characters' actions speak for themselves. As I said before, Morph is just a quaint little show about a group of simple and endearing characters that inhabit a slightly surreal world, and they just do whatever they feel like. In fact, some of the episodes are so simple that a lot of them are just one joke played out for less than a minute. Like when Morph and his friend Chaz, who was always my favourite character, call up a help centre just so that they can dance to the Please Hold music.
Please hold. Your call is currently being held in a queue.
Or similarly where they run on twin record desks to also play music, OK Go style. It's very simple and enjoyable, and it's just the kind of thing you'd want in a kids show. In fact, Morph is the kind of show that I regard as being the perfect first show to show to a newborn child, since it's very unthreatening and has a nice slow pace to it. It's very creative and is simple enough that any person, regardless of how much their brain is developed, can understand it, which is all the more fitting when you realise that Morph was the first major project that Aardman worked on. In fact, Morph is such a member of the old guard in terms of Aardman, he wasn't even created by Nick Park, since he hadn't joined the company yet. Instead, he's the brainchild of Peter Lord, the other main man behind Aardman, so much so that he's basically the mascot of Aardman behind Wallace and Gromit, and yet ironically the two have never crossed paths, not even in a background cameo, as far to my knowledge. Admittedly, the rules of Morph's world aren't very consistent, but like any great cartoon, there doesn't need to be. The show is just meant to be a great exercise of the imagination, both for the viewers and the creators. In fact, Morph is essentially the sophomore sophomore year animation student's final project turned into a franchise, only with a lot more effort put into it, and much less pretentiousness. And since Morph's animation style is so simple, and so linear throughout the franchise's run, that you could watch an old episode from the 70s, or an episode made right now, and almost not be able to tell the difference, with the exception of the screen size, of course. The writing of Morph is so timeless that it could exist at any time. Really, all I need to say about Morph is go watch it. There's an official YouTube channel that has uploaded a ton of Morph episodes and still uploads them on a regular basis, both old and new, and has some great compilations and behind the scenes videos as well. No matter how much they add more modern elements, it still stays timeless. Simply put, Morph is a show that needed to exist, and in a way feels like it's almost always been around. It's the kindly grandparent of stop-motion kids shows, and I'm sure that he's going to keep going long into the future. So, to close, Morph may not be the most mentally stimulating TV show in the world. It is a great, enjoyable show that anyone could watch, and everyone should watch. And that seems like the great way to both end this episode and start this year's Aardmay. But stick around, because there's plenty more to come.